All right, so here we go. Today we are going to go over the cure notice and the cure process. Really, it is it's a very unique tool that we use in Arizona. Oftentimes, when I have agents that are coming from other states, this is something that is completely foreign to them. They don't understand why this exists or how to get things done, and it is really there just to protect everybody and just build in a check for anything going on. So I'm going to throw it out there. So who here knows what do you? This is a giveaway question, but if somebody is like going to breach the contract or they're in violation of the contract, what's the first thing for the other agent to do?
Give you a cure notice.
Yes, so file a cure. Awesome.
Yep.
Very, very important. I'm going to pull one up so we can actually look at the document. In the AAR contract, if you remember back to your school, you have like different states a contract can be in. You have like valid, you have voidable, you have unenforceable, those kinds of things. Like unenforceable if it's with, illegal, if it's actually contracting illegal things or things like that. You have voidable, meaning there's things wrong with it, but if everybody's okay with it, you're probably okay with it. And then you have, of course, valid, which is everything's good. So what they really did was build into the purchase contract a little clause that makes it voidable if somebody is in breach, right? It doesn't automatically just snap shut, right? If somebody is not following the rules, right, it makes it voidable, and so that allows the two parties to come to terms, right? It doesn't automatically just end. So let me share my screen here, and all right, you guys can see, I don't know which screen. You guys see the contract, right? You don't see a topographic map? Okay, good, because that's on my other screen. All right, so down here, and we can always do this. I think we can. There we are. There we go. I just did cure, right? So it mentions that a few times in here. If you cure notice, right? Unfulfilled loan contingency, cure notice. It talks about it throughout here on different things. And it actually defines it here in 7A. So right here, a party shall have an opportunity to cure a potential breach of this contract. That's all that sentence is. So that is right there, just defining, hey, just because there's a potential breach doesn't mean you're kicked out automatically. A party shall have an opportunity to cure it. So you're giving everybody a chance. So it's kind of a second chance. If a party fails to comply with any provision of the contract, the other party shall deliver a notice to the non-compliant party specifying the non-compliance. If the non-compliance is not cured within 3 days after delivery of such cure period, the failure to comply shall become a breach of contract. Escrow company's recorder's office is closed on the last day of the cure period, and COE must occur to cure a potential breach. COE shall occur on the next day. Both are open for business. So that last sentence is just saying, hey, if you're curing somebody and that pushes close of escrow to Sunday, they're going to automatically make it Monday, right? So you can't like technicality somebody out of closing there. And this defines pretty much straightforward. If a party fails to comply, the other party delivers the notice, and then the party that's failing to comply has 3 days to fix it in some way, right? I had this conversation with an agent the other day. And we have Jennifer joining us. So I'm going to bring in Jennifer. A cure isn't necessarily have to come perfectly back in contract. Just the buyer and seller, the two parties of the contract, have to agree, right? Have to come together and say, this is, we both agree that this is okay to keep moving forward, right? So it says a party shall have an opportunity to cure a potential breach of this contract. So that just means you have to have a meeting of the minds. Both buyer and seller have to say, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So it could be actually fixing that part of the contract. It could be extending close of escrow. It could be throwing some money at it, whatever. Is that understood? Any questions around that? pretty straightforward, right? Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Am I muted?
You are not. I can hear you. So good job. And I don't hear any background noise or anything. So go crazy. If I do, I'll mute you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So this is where the cure notice comes in, or the cure period comes in. Notice this, just like most of the stuff in the contract, this doesn't actually itemize out that you have to use the cure notice, but it does talk about the process. Now, what we like to do, though, is to actually use the cure notice built by AAR. And that's just simply, let's see, I don't have that down. All right. I'm going to go get it from DocuSign. You could technically produce a cure notice in Microsoft Word, right? You could write stuff and produce it if you knew all the right data to put in there. But AAR is really cool in the fact that they know not everybody wants to do that from scratch, so they created a cure notice for us. Really very nice of them. So I am pulling up my DocuSign to pull it in. And I know this is kind of a slog for some people, but I actually like to show this on these videos because it shows you can go here and get all of the stuff. They're all here. Anything that is AAR is in DocuSign, and we have it accessed for free. I know there's Authentisign and Dotloop and Transaction Desk and I don't know, a myriad of other stuff. And this is the one that KW has a partnership with, so we get it for free. I have too many things going on. Shouldn't have SketchUp going on. All right. So while I'm pulling this up, who here has used a cure notice and found it's a nice tool?
I can't
Tell me.
say I've used one.
Oh yeah.
But I got a cure notice put on me a couple times during a difficult contract, and at first I had no clue what it was until I actually read it. I was like, "What is this?" So it was just something simple. I think once it was rectified, it was within the time period that the cure period was stated, and we just went on about our contract. So
good deal. Well, and that's what it's for. So the other thing I want to state about the cure notice is it's not a bad thing, right? I know a lot of agents are like, I don't want to issue them a cure because it's kind of you're kind of trying to whip them into line and tell them what's going on, and that may not sit well with the other agent. And it's the right thing to do for your client, because here's the other thing about cure, right? We looked at that. We looked at the contract, and that is the first thing. It says a party shall have the opportunity to cure a potential breach, right? So there is no potential breach that automatically cancels the contract that you don't have to cure for. So in order to protect your client and even give them the opportunity to cancel, you have to cure first, right? So, I mean, I think in all honesty and fairness, like every single contract out there could have a cure notice filed on it. How many people have actually had full loan documents delivered to title 3 days prior to close of escrow? Right? How often does that happen? Right? No, they show up like the day, right? So that's a violation. It's supposed to be in there 3 days prior to close of escrow. That means if close of escrow is on Thursday, then those docs are supposed to be there on Monday. That doesn't happen. So, come Tuesday, every single contract like that could have a cure notice filed, right? The other thing is filing the cure notice does not mean that you are canceling. It's just putting them on notice, right? You do not have to follow through and cancel. You are just supplying the ability to cancel if you wanted to. So it is better to err on the side of go ahead and file the cure notice, because that gives you the opportunity. You don't have to react to it. You don't have to do anything at all if your client doesn't want to. So the notice itself, here we go, is, oh, that's a little much. Can you guys read that okay? Good deal. It's pretty straightforward. You know, as far as documents go for AAR, this is a super simple document, right? You have contract dated, the buyer, the seller, the escrow company, that's on here because this does define escrow instructions for them. And then you have the address. And then you are saying, you know, is this the buyer or the seller that's creating this, and you're delivering this to whom? The buyer or the seller? Now, that is obviously not supposed to be there, but the notice sending notice of the following non-compliance. Now, we need to be specific about the non-compliance, right? We are identifying a specific term of the contract in which they're in violation of, right? So it's I think the most common thing that I see in here is they didn't fix everything from the Binzer, right? You do the final walkthrough and they didn't replace that broken pane of glass, right? So this right, that right there, that is actually what is wrong, but that's not the violation, right? The violation is the specific term in the purchase contract that they are not complying with. So when we go back to the contract for that one right there, we go to buyer disapproval, blah, 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 blah. Get through here. Come on, come on. Walkthroughs. Right, purpose of deciding with buyer that any corrections or repairs agreed by seller have been completed. Right, so that final walkthrough is to verify that they've been completed, and they're supposed to complete it 3 days prior to close of escrow. Right, and that is actually defined up here in section 6, right? Come on, come on. Copies of all, wood destroying, flood hazard, insurance, swimming pool. Goodness gracious. There we go. There we go. Here we go. Seller agrees in writing to correct items disapproved. Seller shall correct items, complete any repairs in a workmanlike manner, and deliver paid receipts, evidence, and corrections of repairs 3 days or blank days prior to close of escrow. So if they have not fixed these things, you're walking in 2 days prior to close of escrow when you're walkthrough and they haven't fixed it, then you're going to be pursuant to section 6J2B, right? So purchase contract, section 6J2B. Seller has not completed repairs agreed to, right? You may get into a little bit more detail there. You can, that's totally up to you, but the primary thing is you're identifying the part of the contract in which they're not compliant with, right? And that's important here for a couple of reasons. One, you want to be specific. You're giving legal notice. You're also, this is going to go to the escrow company, and if somebody starts complaining about it, somebody says, no, this isn't right or something, escrow company is going to hand it to somebody else. They're going to hand it to their lawyers, or their probably their management, and they're going to read this and they're going to look at it. If you've written this all wacky, they're going to be like, well, you know, that you haven't identified the actual violation, right? You identified like things you don't like, but you haven't identified the violation. But if you've written the correct violation in there, then they've got it correct in here. They know what rule of law that they're following. So just write this as if you know a lawyer is going to go read it. And then that's basically it. Pursuant to PC section 6J2B, seller has not completed repairs agreed to by 3 days whatever. And then you sign it. Notice there's only one set of signature blanks here. This is not a contract. This is a notice. So it's unilateral. Your client is the only one that signs it if you're sending this cure notice. And you sign it, you send it over. Pretty straightforward. You're done as far as issuing the notice. Now, let's remember time periods. This gives, if the non-compliance is not cured within 3 days after delivery, the failure to comply shall become a breach of contract. In the event of a breach of contract, review, remedy, section, contract, and consult independent legal counsel. So they kind of, they tell you, hey, it's a breach. If it's a breach, go figure things out. Talk to important people. You don't necessarily have to fully cancel. You have given them notice, but you don't have to cancel. So a cancel would be another notice that would be the cancellation. Pursuant to cure notice on this and this, seller has not remedied. This is a breach of contract. Buyer gets their earnest money back. Blah, blah, blah.
Hey, Chris, in this situation, would you pair this with the final walkthrough form that then lists out like the broken window on that form?
So final walkthrough form is unique, and I haven't touched on it yet because the final walkthrough form has 3 sections. Hey, everything looks good. And then the bottom is I waive it, but the middle is things aren't right. And that in itself is a cure notice, right? So I did choose the cure notice to do here, and we chose a final walkthrough piece, but we might as well just, we could as well have picked the documents aren't there at close of escrow, or seller has not provided the spuds within 3 days of contract acceptance, right? Seller hasn't provided clue within 5 days of contract acceptance. Like all of these things that are in there, this is the cure notice. If I go to the final walkthrough, I'm going to go ahead and close this. So good job, Brent. Thank you. If I go over to the final walkthrough, that center section actually defines out the, where'd all my documents go? I know I got a final walkthrough in here somewhere. The center section is, in essence, a cure.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the clarification. I didn't know that that was actually a cure. I mean, we do the final walkthrough form when something's wrong and send it over, and usually they get it fixed, or, you know, we don't have to go to the point to where we're doing an official cure notice, but I could see where you could.
Oh, this is the pre-closing walkthrough. It's not, of course, it's not. They use some other term. That's why I couldn't find it. So in this pre-closing walkthrough, you'll see section 1 is everything looks fine. Section 3 is I waive the right to a final walkthrough. And then section 2 actually states cure period notice. Pursuant to the remedies in section of this contract, delivery of this form shall constitute notice of non-compliance. Seller fails to cure it within 3 days. So this is in effect, section 2 is in effect a cure notice. So you don't have to fill out both of them if it is something around the final walkthrough in which you're calling them out on. So what are those things that fit on this form that would call out? That would be the like what we just did. If they didn't finish the repairs that they said, what else?
Well, if the property is not in the same condition as it was when you went under contract.
Very much so.
Like they hit the corner of a wall when they're moving a couch, and now there's a big old gouge in it.
Like you named the most common thing is that the movers grabbed the couch and scraped the wall down the stairs. Right, it happened in the house that I'm in right now. The same thing. They had to come out and fix the wall. So that is the most common thing. Something that came up the other day was like they had a potted plant on their like patio or something for years, and they moved it, and the space where the plant was on was of course like the pot had leaked through it, and so underneath it nobody could see it ever, but now since they move it, the wood deck was all wacky underneath that plant, right? So when the buyers came out, they were like, I had no idea that there was damage to the wood deck underneath here. So that quote damage to the wood deck ended up being, you know, something of concern to them. We worked it out. Wasn't that big of a deal, obviously, but those things happen. And those, if you're representing the buyer, those are the things that go on this final walkthrough form to give your buyer the capacity to cancel, that give them some sort of leverage, right? Without this form, they have no leverage around those things, right? Yeah, so there you go. Whether it's the final walkthrough form or the cure notice. Now, I'll go a little bit into, let's say we cure them for something and they still don't do it. Then what do we need to do? And your client is like, I want out, right? What do we need to do?
This
I know
is new
all of you are
territory
actually
for me.
answering and just on mute. But.
Yeah.
So when you have cured something and 3 days pass and they still don't do it, now you need to give them a notice. And I'll tell you, 3 or 4 years ago, actually, you can see, yeah, 2019, they built this, this notice. They used to not have a notice form. You had to like send an email or like draft something up in Word and have them sign it or something like that. You had to make up something. But then they said, oh, there's a boatload of times in the contract when it says, buyer is to send seller notice or seller is to send buyer notice. Well, they finally came up with a notice form so that you could actually put it in here. It looks a lot like the cure. It just has data at the top and a bunch of blank lines and a signature. Same kind of thing. It is only one set of signature blanks. This is unilateral, right? So this is not a contract. This is a notice or disclosure or something like that. Something that you're letting the other side know. When you have cured somebody and you've told them this is, and they didn't follow through, and your client says, I want out now, they haven't followed through, I'm going to cancel. Then you send the notice using this form with your client's signature on it, just stating to, pursuant to section, oh, no, it's still one. So we're still here, but we want to go down to this cure period right here. Pursuant to section 7, really, most of this stuff talks about it, but it's these two pieces right here, section 7A and 7B, that line this up. So let's say I'm gonna make this up as we go. Let's say it's the buyer didn't deliver documents to title and still hasn't delivered documents to title, and the seller has lost faith in the buyer's ability to actually produce a loan for this thing. So we pushed out COE is come and gone. We gave them an extension extra, whatever. We finally cured them for it. They still haven't done it. We think they're just, slacking and not have anything. So we're gonna cancel them. So this is now pursuant to section 7A and 7B of the contract, and cure notice filed. So 7A, 7B of the PC. Cure notice was filed and the buyer failed to comply within 3 days. Seller elects to cancel. Cancel this contract. And then the next thing is escrow instructions. So this is what you're doing, right? Your seller elects to cancel this contract, right? Next thing you want to do is in 7B, you're talking about who gets the earnest money, right? So this talks about it in here. We could go through all here, but it's basically saying the seller's now going to keep the earnest money. I keep doing that. I don't need to control tab that. And this is, you don't need to quote the specific contract lines in this, because we are making up escrow instructions for here because of the breach. So escrow to release earnest. Seller to release escrow money to seller immediately. Right, sign it and send it to everybody involved. And if everybody's on board and all of the escrow company is doing the right stuff, they will cancel this contract and cut a check ASAP. They won't do it without consulting with the buyer first. It's their legal responsibility to make sure everybody knows what's going on, not to get agreement, but to make sure everybody knows what's going on. So they will let the buyer's agent know right away, hey, they filed to cancel and the earnest money is going to the seller. Right. And they've filed it, like, you haven't done anything, so I'm going to do this. Now, I'd say 8 times out of 10, then that's what happens. Like, they can't do anything, they don't have any way around it. So the escrow company cuts a check and the contract's canceled and everybody goes home. Those 2 extra times, the buyer has some reason to push back, some capacity. Now, that I would say most of the time when the buyer has a capacity to push back, it's because the selling agent who has written out the notices and such like that has written holes into it, right? Has not closed everything, not quoted the correct lines, has cured for things that are kind of fuzzy or quasi complete or something like that. They're curing for the contract, for the documents not being at title, but they are at title. They just haven't been signed, stuff like that. So they're not really on top of it. So they've left holes in there. So this is good to consult with another agent, consult with the broker, consult with the escrow company, just say, hey, we're going to cancel this. I want to make sure that I got my my I's crossed, my T's dotted. So it's always good. But then that's it. You send notice, you'll get canceled, and your seller will get your earnest money. All right. I've taken up a solid 30 minutes of y'all's time. What kind of questions, what kind of thoughts, what kind of comments do you have?
Can I throw you a curveball?
Yeah.
What if it's the opposite situation where it's the seller? The example is seller hasn't gone into escrow to sign their stuff. Buyer's already ready to close. Basically, seller's dragging feet.
Same thing.
I mean, you go to close. I mean, if you go to cancel the deal, I mean, the buyer's kind of out. It's not like the earnest money's there from the seller to be released to the buyer. What would be your recommendations on something like that?
So we have the rules and things that we're following within the contract, right? And we have to, and this is something that I highly recommend that we always talk with our clients about, especially our buyers, that as we get closer to the end, our only negotiating tool is cancellation, right? We don't have a boatload of other stuff. All we do is we threaten to cancel, and we threaten to cancel and get our earnest money back, and the seller's got to go on it. And that's what brings the seller to the table to do stuff, right? Whereas, as opposed to that, the seller has no threat to cancel, right? Seller has no unilateral capacity to cancel a contract, right? They've got to wait for a buyer to breach, something like that. The buyer has lots of things in there. It has these, has the inspection period, the Benzer, has their financing contingency, has appraisal contingency, has lots of things that give the buyer an immediate reason to cancel. And with your example, the seller doesn't sign, the buyer, you file a cure, and the buyer's tool is that the buyer can cancel. And so this is often a really excellent checkpoint for the buyer to push emotion out and realize this is a business deal, and our negotiation tool is to cancel on this seller so the seller doesn't get their money. Right. I know my buyers are in love with this house. They've already measured for their furniture, and that's where they want to be. And that they've already named their kids' rooms and stuff. But we have to remind that within the construct of the contract, your negotiation tool is canceling. So you have to be okay with canceling. If you're not okay with canceling, and if you're just going to lay down for everything, you're just going to lay down for everything, right? Now, if the seller never signs anything, then he never signs anything, and you're not going to get the house anyways. So we might as well file the right documents so that we can at least get our money back and end the whatever ongoing mess of the seller not being able to do anything. So that's where I come in there. It's the same process though. It's you file the cure, you let your buyers know that this is the process, right? If they don't close, Now, that's within the constructs of our contract. At this point, the buyers have, maybe they've turned in notice at their rental, or they moved across country. They've incurred costs, right? They've incurred things that put burden on them. And if the seller, through some nefarious act, breaches and doesn't allow things to go through, now that seller has caused harm, right? And that's it's a simple little 4-letter word, but it is a very important legal word. Harm is what then the buyers can sue the seller for, right? That's not within the constructs of our contract. Right? Our contract is follow the rules to get the closing, and that's it, right? We don't deal with harm. We don't deal with anything like that. We just and then if things aren't working out and people aren't doing what they say, then we're going to cure, and we're going to close, and we're going to cancel, and we'll get our earnest money back. Then the buyer calls up a lawyer and says, this is what happened. I want to sue that seller for specific performance. Right. And that's where they go after. They just spent 10 grand moving across the country, and, they time out of work and blah, blah, blah. And that's where they can go after the seller for these things. And honestly, there's case law where the judge has said, seller, you signed up to sell this thing. You are selling this thing. I'm forcing your signature. You have sold it. Right. And they'll do it. So that can happen. Just realize that is outside of the purview of our contract, which is what we have capacity to interpret and manipulate the language within. What else? Good question.
That was just a good answer. I kind of brings up the fact that documentation still could force the hand of the seller in that situation. So
absolutely. If you are representing a seller who is not awesomely cooperative, right, and they're in that situation, it is our responsibility to let them know, hey, so the buyer is going to go through their process. They're going to file this cure. They're going to cancel. They're going to get their earnest money back. And I know it's outside of this contract, but that does open up their door for a lawsuit against you. I'm just letting you know that, right? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to file that suit. I don't know anything, but just you should know that this puts you in that way, right? We literally did have it was the other side, have a buyer do that. Buyer, cash buyer, investor, just went to Mexico like 5 days before closing, fell off the face of the earth. There's nothing, right? Seller was selling their house. They had already bought another house. They needed to sell this house, and the buyer disappears, right? And so we do everything we can. The earnest money go to the seller. Everything to follow along with the seller, and that buyer is still in Mexico. And I guarantee that seller is bringing suit against that buyer for performance, right? For negligence. So that just does happen. World has all kind of people. All right. Anything else? I know there's lots more, but it's good stuff. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording.